Welcome to another Pitch with Pete episode. I am super excited today to have Chris, who is the founder CEO of Kingscrowd. In full disclosure, I am a very small investor in this company, largely because I'm a big fan of what Chris is doing, and also because I am very excited to do anything I can to support the general equity crowdfunding space. And so, really excited to have Chris on today to talk a little bit about his business. And if you're interested, they are raising right now on WeFunder, and so you can actually participate in not only investing in Kingscrowd, but also being a supportive member of the equity crowdfunding space, generally speaking. So Chris, I would love to maybe just start with, like I do in a lot of these episodes, of just understanding like the origin story of how you came up with Kingscrowd and what brought you to the place you are at today.
Sure. So thank you very much, Pete, for having me on. I appreciate it and appreciate anyone supporting the industry and helping to build it up. So I think that's awesome. So I started my career in traditional kind of management consulting and at a firm called LEK Consulting. And basically, we spent a lot of time working on behalf of private equity firms that were looking at target companies they wanted to acquire. And when they were doing that, they would bring us in to do everything from the financial models to the market models, the management discussions. We would do the deep dive on that deal, right? And I would spend anywhere between 200 to 400 hours diligencing a deal over 5 to 8 weeks. And it was during that time that I realized two things. One, I was spending a lot of nights at the office to 2, 3, 4 a.m. in the morning because we were trying desperately to find good data on the market and on the business that we were looking at. And it just baffled me that we were trying to help companies and private equity firms make billion-dollar decisions on abysmally bad data. And I said, boy, there has to be a better way than this. This is not good. And the second thing that really stood out to me was that I would spend all of that time diligencing a deal, becoming expert on the deal, and then realizing, oh, I can't actually invest in this deal. I have no way of getting into this deal. And that was really upsetting. So like any good founder, is back in 2014, I Googled, why can't I invest in startups, in private companies? And that's when I realized all the structures that existed. And I learned about the Jobs Act. And I got really, really excited at this idea that we were going to open up the private markets to the general public. Oh, and by the way, solve that transparency issue around actually requiring a sharing of financial data and things like that. So for me, it was the end-all, be-all. I was like, this is the answer to all of my problems. Ended up starting a blog in 2014, literally before the Jobs Act even was truly enacted, right? It took till 2016 to have Reg CF live. And started writing a blog and meeting with every founder and CEO building something in the market. Ran that for a few years as kind of a side hustle. And then eventually it was noticed by one of the founders of Napster from way back in the day, and they said, hey, why don't you make that moonlighting project into a full-time business? And I said, all right, let's make this into the Morningstar Bloomberg solution. And so that was really the genesis in 2018 to hop out of my job and start this full time.
That's great. That's awesome. So can you tell us a little bit about Kingscrowd? What problems are you solving today?
Yep. So today there is, north of 80 plus marketplaces where you can go and find and invest in startups online. In any given year, there's between 2,000 and 3,000 individual startups making themselves accessible online to invest as little as $100 into, which is an incredible opportunity and a burdensome problem at the same time, right? How do I find these deals? Where do I go? How do I diligence them? It's kind of a disaster, to be honest with you. And there's a tried and true model that we know exists, right? If you go and look at Bloomberg or Morningstar or S&P or Motley Fool or Seeking Alpha for public equities, right? If you're thinking about investing in Google and in NVIDIA, well, we're doing the very, very, very same thing, except we're focusing on this new world of alternative investment opportunities. So we are both the aggregator, the data provider, and a due diligence support provider to our investors.
And one of the things that I really like about your platform is the ability to track investments after you've made them too.
I'm so glad you said that. That actually is a major, major value add to our industry. Look, we are all pretty much passionate users of this space on our team, especially our VP of product, who has well over, I believe, 200 investments now in this market. I have about 40 plus another 27 or 28 through Kingscrowd Capital. So yeah, we are believers that we need a better way to manage all of our investments. And by the way, we also want to see more encouraging of and following of how these companies do over time, right? Performance data matters, and that's ultimately how we're going to help grow this market, is showing proof points that actually companies do well over time. And obviously, in the near term, you're going to have lots of failures, lots of business closures, because the losers lose fast and the winners take a long time to win.
Yeah, I think it's so helpful. I mean, a lot of the reason why I started my YouTube channel was just to help people and educate them on, what to do when it comes to doing due diligence, how to make investment decisions, and being able to understand what you just said, right? Which is the failures happen early. Don't get too discouraged, right? Keep investing because your winners, they take longer, but when they win, they tend to hit it really big. And if you get too discouraged early on and you hop out of the game, you miss out on some of those longer term bigger wins.
I'll say two things. One, we have an investor in Kingscrowd who's invested a good deal of money, probably north of $500,000 since I started the company. Been a huge supporter of Kingscrowd. He told me that he spent 17 years in the red as an angel investor. He's like, and then I put a few dollars in this little company called DraftKings at a $3 million valuation. He's like, and I thought the company was a dumb idea. It's like, but my friend said I should do it. He's like, and then I made $6 million. He's like, and I was far and away in the black, And that's the type of thing, there's a patience to this. There's a willingness to have to fail and to lose money along the way. And the second thing I'll say is we're actually building a tax tool that we're hoping to launch this season, where we're going to actually try and help you identify all of the losers in your portfolio for the past year for those capital, loss write-offs. And I will tell you, they are nice to add to your taxes at tax time. So what I tell you is wait to look at all your losers until the end of the year when you're going to file your taxes and make you feel a little bit better, because you'll see that number on your H&R Block or TurboTax account go up as you add those in.
Feels like there are a few different revenue streams within Kingscrowd or business products. So you've got Kingscrowd Capital, you've got the dashboards, you have the research reports. Can you maybe talk through the different parts of the business, and particularly from a revenue perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. So I kind of say we have two main assets, and then there's a multitude of ways in which we can monetize them. So the two main assets are our data and our user base, our audience. So let's start with the data side of things. So we collect over 300 data points, quite literally, on every company that's doing a Reg CF or Reg A Plus offering. We basically have 100% market coverage at this point of every equity and debt deal done under Reg CF and Reg A Plus in any given year. So those 300 underlying data points are very, very valuable, right? So at the most basic level, we sell our data, our literal database. So and it's interesting, the customers that have come along and purchased that, it's been people that I maybe necessarily didn't expect.
Can you talk a little bit about your traction to date? And would also love to understand, as part of that, how are you getting clients across those different products today, and where does that go in the future?
Yep. So we started with our consumer subscription business, and we've grown that to over 5,000 paying customers today. And that's a really nice book of business, but it took a long time to figure these things out, right? We went through multiple iterations of price points, of product tiers, of simplifying, of complexing, and then going back to being more simple. So it took a long time to kind of find that right mix. So now we have, one subscription tier, one paid subscription tier that's $30 a month, $300 a year. We have a lot of grandfathered folks in at different price points at this point, but we now have one tier that works really well, that has really strong retention and all of that.
What does a data partnership look like when you work with maybe a university or a professor?
Yeah, great question. So right now, there's definitely a bit of customization that occurs with each scenario. So ultimately, a university will come to us and basically saying, you guys have data, right, on this market? We'll say yes. And then they say, okay, here's what I'm thinking. And then they usually have a question in mind that they're trying to solve for.
What percentage of the business today comes from kind of this data product, and how much do you anticipate it being part of the business going forward?
I talk about it today as raw data sales because we quite literally provide CSV downloads of this data. But the world that I see us moving into, we've actually created an open API that we're going to start basically selling the open API instead of just the raw data. But ultimately, where I see that getting really, really interesting is you can imagine a world, right, where, and we're starting to see inklings of this, but hedge funds start to come in this market, especially as secondary markets are built, right? And they start functioning at a high level. And they go, we want to look at all the trade data. And we want to build our own models off of this. We want to use your ratings plus a mix of trade data, plus a mix of pricing, so on and so forth, and build our own models or build our own funds. And so there is a world where it becomes a rather large business and is, maybe half of the business in the future. I will tell you right now, I don't exactly know. The way that we kind of build this business is we just keep building the data, and little by little new customers start coming in, and we look to serve those customers and then build pipelines into those as we see their real opportunities. So I can't say for certain what it'll look like, but as a data business, I would say I have a pretty high likelihood feeling that it's going to be a very large chunk of our business in the future, but it will likely look very different from what it looks like today. It'll be more of a institutional data portal.
Can you talk a little bit about the raise? Why you're raising the capital, where the money's going, what you're hoping to achieve with it?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're raising up to $750,000 on WeFunder right now. It's a part of a broader $1.75 million round that we've been actively raising for the past, call it 7 or 8 months. Admittedly, it's a down round from our last round of funding a little over 2 years ago. And that really came down to the fact that as the tech recession hit in a pretty big way, we found ourselves kind of up a creek without a paddle, right? In a situation where it was either raising a down round at a valuation that made far more sense in this new world that we're in, or face, a far harder reality.
Well, thank you, Chris, for being on today. Super interesting business. For those that want to learn more about Kingscrowd, not only can you go to kingscrowd.com, but you can also find their equity crowdfunding site on wefunder.com/Kingscrowd. And thank you again so much for being on, Chris.
Thank you, Peter. It's been a great discussion.